world, people are creating, painting, singing, dancing, filming, turning their lives into art and their art into change. Each of them a thread, each of us a thread. And together we are something extraordinary. This is Voices of Solidarity, the podcast that weaves the tapestry of global LGBTQIA+ solidarity and resilience, one story at a time. I'm your host, Alex, he, him, and today we add a new thread, in fact, the first thread to the tapestry of Voice of Solidarity relaunched. Today's thread comes from Namibia, where colonial history and contemporary human rights struggles continue to shape political and cultural life. My guest is Shishani, a Namibian-Belgian singer, songwriter, producer, and activist making music to raise social awareness on various topics such as human rights, including indigenous people and LGBTQIA+ community, climate justice, and decolonial memory. I am so excited, Shishani, to have you here, especially because you are the spiritual mother of Voices of Solidarity. So I'd love to hear from you, your kind of story, where your story begins and how it connects to Voice of Solidarity as well.
Yeah, it's wonderful that we're doing this, Alex. So thanks also for being the host of this really important podcast that is just starting, but I can feel that it's already holding something really important. So I'm currently in Amsterdam, but I was born in Namibia. And all of my work is basically centered between Namibia and the Netherlands, where I work, obviously as a queer artist. And Voices of Solidarity started as fundraising events that we hosted in Amsterdam and another city called Utrecht to raise funds to support court cases in Namibia for our LGBTIQ+ community. And that was such a magical experience because I was going to Namibia the 1st of March and the last week of February, like I had 2 weeks to put this together. I told my friend Lou, who is German, based in Utrecht, I said, I want to do something before I go home. I want to be able to, bring some money along. I need to do something because, so much is going on. And most of the issues that we face, as, let's say, minority groups is financial and legal power. So we could be going on the streets, which is really important, but we also need to be able to represent ourselves within the courts. And that just costs a lot of money. So I really wanted to do something. And I was like, this is mad because, it's just 2 weeks. But lo and behold, the venues came through, sponsored their spaces for free in Amsterdam, Tolhuis, and in Utrecht, the Nijverheid. I had like 12 artists that just said, I'm on board from all over the world, coming to show their solidarity as allies, as part of the community. Like the level of love, commitment, support that just flowed so organically and so quickly was just, I couldn't imagine that we were able to pull this up in 2 weeks. And it stuck with me. And I shared this with, like on the platforms. And this is how I got to know John also from our Pride. And this is how the conversation started going. Like, how can we continue this concept of Voices of Solidarity? Because it is solidarity which keeps us going. And it can come from such unexpected corners, from places in the world you would have never expected, from people you would have never met. We have now this technology that is connecting us across the world. So how can we add important, inspiring stories to that? And this is basically how it started. And now here we are at the first episode.
I love it. And I can already see so many threads connecting. And this is just episode 1, but so many people that are facing similar struggles and they're trying to do the same thing. This year here in London, there'll be a great case coming from Trinidad and Tobago, an activist who's using legal action to kind of promote and support LGBT identities, especially in countries where it's illegal to be gay because of colonial time
Exactly.
legislation. Again, what you're doing really resonates, and that's the whole point of this tapestry, connecting each other so we can be stronger together. But this episode and this series is also about the connection between activism and art, and why people like you choose art as a form of activism, as a way of expressing a message that you hope will change things. So I'd like to go back to that, go back to your art and understand, where that kind of impulse comes from, how you create. And yeah, so walk me through that kind of artistic process, I guess, and of you as an artist.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say it started in the cradle. So I was born in Namibia. I come from a mixed family. So I have a black mom, I have a white dad. We have, the history of just coming out of apartheid. I was 3 years old. So you grow up in this system where um, there is division placed upon people based on their looks. So this is the nest that, like from a very early age, I felt like, what's going on? This is not right. At home, it was like this rainbow nation of all kinds of people across all cultural backgrounds, countries. That is what my parents created. So that to me was normal. And then you step outside and you figure out, but everybody's separated. Everybody's set up against each other. Something is off. Then we emigrated to the Netherlands, and obviously I saw, my mom struggling with the racism she faced here as well, because we grew up in a tiny town in the northern part of the country. And me being often like one of the few kids of color in certain spaces, and just feeling all this, the burden of representation, right? So music has been part of my life. I come from a very musical family, but it became my diary. So music was that safe space where I could write, Dear Diary, and then I could just put my emotions there, because I felt quite lonely growing up. Um, Not a lot of people understood, the reality of even like being from a mixed family was not that common then. So then you have this whole identity question of like, but who are you? What are you? The questions of, do you feel more this or more that? It was never and, it was a very or conversation, either or. Um, so like music became that safe space for me to express my feelings, to express my doubt, my hurt, my insecurities, my rage, my pride, my everything. And it was a very, how can I put this? Loyal friend, like music never disappointed me. Music never betrayed me. Music was always there, and music comforted me. So my music started as self-therapy. And as I said before, like I come from a musical family, so I ended up wanting to pursue this. And I was not so interested in just like soft, easy songs, because that was not my life, because I was grappling with this whole identity question. Whether I was in Europe, I was a person of color. When I'm in Namibia, I'm white and I'm European. Like you're nonstop kind of trying to navigate the space of who are you?
Yeah.
Then obviously me being queer, and just finding voice, finding a way, finding a place to express. Um, I needed that, like through music. That was really my saving grace. And I realized that by sharing my story and actually just being vulnerable and sharing my story through music, what that did to the crowds, and that something
Mm.
was happening in the space, that energy shifted, that people after shows continuously come to me crying and saying, you really gave voice to something that I felt that I couldn't put into words, or music itself just moves you to allow yourself to feel what you're oppressing, what you don't want to face. So I realized like, wow, there's magic to music. It's not just soothing. It's a medicine. I felt it very early on. And I had many interests because, like I said, I grew up in different countries, um, often being the only person. So you get this kind of loner experience. But that meant also that I
Yes.
could really connect with anybody. I can connect with anybody.
Yeah.
Because there's
Yeah.
not one group that I ascribe to or fit in. And that gave me such a flexibility on a personal level as a human being, but also as an artist. And this is how I also kept being curious to other people, like, but how do you do it? Where are you from? How are things over there? And because I saw all these islands, whether it was in Namibia and how everybody was set up against each other, or being in the Netherlands and all, people kind of stick to their cultural background because it's comfortable, because it's what you know. But because me, like, I
Mm.
grew up as a wanderer, like
Yeah.
wandering around, I was like visiting all these islands, and then I realized we have so much in common, but we look at the differences. So then it was this subconscious mission, I guess, to find connection in a world of separation. That
Mm.
now, like in retrospect,
Yeah.
the mini me didn't know, but now I can say, like, that's exactly what you were looking for, because you experienced all the separation and all you wanted was that people could get along. Just a very
Hmm.
pure wish, of a young person growing up, and like, I just want to be myself, and I don't want to have to fight. I don't want to have to choose who I am. I want to be all that I am. So this is basically the journey of like why I do what I do. And then very consciously I realized, like, I studied anthropology, I did musicology as well, but it's very specialized. So somebody interested in that field would maybe look up a work that I might have written. But when you make
Hmm.
art, you can connect with any person in any corner of the world. You don't need to understand the academic language, the theories that it's embedded in. You can bypass all of that. And I've had the strongest connections with people through singing for them, and
Yeah.
realizing how in Dutch there's a word which is ontwapenend, and it means like you put your guards down. You
Hmm.
like
You're
all the guards
vulnerable.
that you have to like keep face, like music can just go straight
Hmm.
past that. And I've felt like
Yeah.
I don't want people to understand that the world is messed up. I want you to feel what that means. And from a
Hmm.
space of feeling, people will act, because you can know stuff. You can be scrolling and you can see that many people bombed, died, blah, blah, blah. It's just a number. But when you feel something, that's when it will make you want to do something. You want to get up, you want to make a change in whatever space that is, in whatever capacity, however big, however small. So we need to feel, we need to connect to the essence that we've learned to forget because of everything that we're taught. Masculinity is like this, femininity is like that. You have to behave like this. This is your identity, stick to it. You are not the same as those people. So we have all this programming that we have to deprogram. And I feel like art is just the most magical, real, essential way to get the message across. Not from a rational perspective, but from a holistic perspective of understanding and
Mm.
feeling.
I absolutely love it. I love the journey that you described in terms of starting from a diary therapy for yourself and then realizing the impact that it had on others and the way that it was allowing you to connect, but also to open up new experiences and feelings for others. And I wanted to ask you, so is that your form of activism in a way? Is the kind of, the power of emotions and creating those spaces where people can let their guard down and explore some of the topics that you bring in through your music? Is that how you define your activism? Is that where you find your activism?
I think what we can define as activism can be many things. So there are many
Hmm.
arenas in which I work. Um, Also because of the background that I have, like from this artistic but also
Yeah.
academic perspective. So yes, I think my life goal basically is to let people connect to their feeling. That
Yes.
I really feel that there's so much power in that, right? In these times we can we can celebrate vulnerability as a strength. So me being vulnerable, sharing my
Hmm.
story, my journey, the things that I've overcome, now we can see it as like a form of strength. But obviously the way I
Yes.
grew up and many people have grown up and still grow up is like, don't share that because then you look, flawed and weak and et cetera, et cetera. So
Mm.
being able to be real, I think that is the biggest challenge for any of us. And to be real is
Yeah.
to be able to, I can have my energetic, assertive, powerful moments, but a part of me is also very sensitive, is very tender, is very, like I have all these aspects to me, just like you, just like anybody
Hmm.
who is listening, anybody in the world. We have all of this that makes up who we are. And I feel like we are all programmed to play roles. And to be real also means like when you see this horrible news, any person with a heart, with empathy, if that message really hits you, of course you're going to be devastated because you allow yourself to connect to everything you're feeling. But we are all trained obviously to numb a lot just to be able to carry
Hmm.
on. So I think a big part of my activism is there, like creating softness, because we're living in such a harsh world that softness feels like the biggest thing to achieve. Like, can we just relax? Can we just allow ourselves? Can we allow ourselves to take a step back? Can we allow ourselves to say, I'm not able to do this. I don't, I don't have the capacity to hold this right now. I need a moment. I feel sad. I'm angry. Like all of these things need a place. And I feel that that's been hardened out in us as we grow up. And at the same time, like through music and creating that softness, there's also more practical things. Like I perform in many, many, many spaces, corporate spaces, academic spaces, protests where you just need to speak truth to matter. And that is
Yeah.
not, and that just means you have to say what you have to say. And not everybody's waiting for that message. And not everybody's welcoming that message. And not everybody will praise you for that message. I mean, I've performed also in like political spaces in Namibia where you start off with a song, which is a cute love song, and everybody's like, amazing, beautiful voice. And then I sing minority and I say human rights for all people, including, the gay and
Hmm.
trans and lesbian people that we have in our country and worldwide. And nobody claps at the end of the song,
Yeah.
maybe two people
Yeah.
from like a crowd of 200. So my activism has been speaking out, like speak up even if your voice trembles in the spaces that, could boycott you. And I have experienced that as well. Like, you don't have to come anymore to this performance because you're going to be that person that's going to say this and this and this, and we don't want that. And my activism has been staying true to that part of myself, to never tone it down, to just say what I feel that needs to be said wherever I can and with whomever I can. And I'm really trying to move out of preaching to the choir, but really being in the spaces
Mm.
where we
Yeah.
don't agree, where we don't look at each other, um, like where there is not that space to have these conversations because it's just, like it would be a collision, it would be a clash. And that is my form of activism, of being in those spaces anyway, and to try to find a language and a bridge, because we need to you need to be, how do you say, because I love myself fully for who I am.
Hmm.
I have to have, boundaries, and I have to stand up for myself, and I have to, um, I can't let somebody tell me who I am and how much value there is. But at the same time, knowing that we are now just in a super polarized time, the biggest challenge is, where do we find connection? Where do you find a bridge? How do we talk to people across from us? How do we keep that connection?
Yeah.
How do we bring them back to their humanity? And that being like, I'm a flesh and bone and you're flesh and bone. We're
Absolutely.
spirits having a human experience, you
Yeah.
know? So that is, I think, that is my activism. Again, it's like softness, trying to create softness in very harsh spaces. And it could be anything. It could be a presentation. It could be a speech. It could be a song. It could be it could be many things. It can be performances that show people about, the impact of the colonial history and trying to include queer histories and
Hmm.
trans histories and stories of the now in spaces where I also feel really uncomfortable to do that because I know not everybody's waiting for it.
Yeah. And what you described is very true within our LGBTQ plus community as well. There's a lot of division. There's a lot of people that don't want to have conversations about racism or colonial history or even trans and non-binary rights. There's many parts of our community that are uncomfortable with that. And the idea of voice of solidarity that, came from you, and this idea of the tapestry of resilience is also to show that we can be different, but we need to be connected and to be there for each other, even when we disagree, but to create that space for those emotions, to be explored, to be understood. We can still have different experiences of life, but we still need to be there for each other. And that's my question to you, something that we're going to be asking all our guests on this podcast is, if we think of this um, sort of story and journey as a way of weaving that tapestry of our community, how would you describe your contribution to that tapestry? What's your thread? What is that your work, your voice, your presence, your existence kind of contributes to that movement in a way that is unique to you?
I think it's really staying close to myself. And like I said before, it's trying to guard this sense of a soft power and connection, because I think that takes the most courage. And obviously, like we all play different roles, and we need each single one of us to make the contribution in the way that we are meant to do, you know? But I think what my power has been is to bring people back to their core, um, and that I've been consistent since the moment I stepped on stage, and I've never stopped, so there's never been a second where I stepped away from my beliefs and where I stepped away from the message that I felt I had to share despite anything. So I don't know. I mean, I think we can compare each other, like different artists doing similar things, but obviously each person will have their own flavor to it. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, but
I can feel that softness. I can feel that I love that contrast, but it comes together in your identity and in the way you speak and you do music, the kind of the power of softness. It's so incredible, and you bring it to life. I do think that's what makes you so unique, especially in a space when you have to navigate, you know, multiple identities and being mixed race and live in a place that differ from where you're born, all of that kind of stuff. It's often brings people to become quite aggressive and for their voices to be louder than everyone else, otherwise you become invisible. And somehow you found your power in softness, which is it's I love it. And this is the thread that I will carry forward after this episode, and I
thank
hope
you.
our listeners will do too. So thank you for bringing the first wave in our beautiful tapestry.
Yeah.
We're coming to an end already. These are only short episodes. But I wanted to see before I close if there's any final thoughts, any final gifts that you want to give our listeners today.
I think, the most important thing we can do, not only for others, but for ourselves, is to really stay open. And to stay open in the sense of like allow yourself and therefore also allow others to be somebody that is changing. We're not one fixed identity. You don't have to stick to the identity that you built for yourself. This is something that I am going through myself right now, like stepping into a different form of identity, as in going from queer, going from lesbian to being like, yeah, but I've pushed away my transness like all my life. It's something that I felt so much shame and guilt and fear and around, and I really struggled mainly with allowing myself to be all of that and to change and to let go of those identities that we have. And I think in that openness, and softness towards yourself, there's also more empathy for other people. So even if you don't understand, like we talk about our community right now, you have the L, the G, B, T, I, Q plus, like we all have specific experiences based on, this identity bracket that we're also part of. And, so you hang out in different kind of places, you party differently, you look different, your lifestyles are different, etc. And therefore we're different.
Yeah.
But there's also this like curiosity to want to know, like, but who else? Because I feel we're always talking about the community.
Mm-hmm.
But where is that community? Because it's quite specified into like, okay, you guys chill over
Yeah.
there, and then the girlies are over here, and then the non-binaries and the trans folks are over here. And, this openness of like, okay, we might be very different and we might be vibing to very different music or just anything, but where's that openness? The openness
I
towards each
love
other,
that.
right? Like,
Yeah.
try to get to know, like, try to hang out with somebody from that community that we're part of that you
Mm-hmm.
usually don't hang out with, because it's the same thing that
Yeah.
the general audience looks at with us. Like, oh yeah, but I do have this one gay friend, and then you're like this anomaly, right?
Yes.
But amongst ourselves, actually the same is happening. Like, do you have
Yeah.
friends that are like from a different segment of the rainbow flag?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to allow yourself to step out and allow yourself to fail and allow yourself to win and allow yourself
Yeah.
to take care of yourself and allow yourself to put borders. So it's just a way of moving through life, like open and
Yeah.
receptive, because every moment is changing, and we're now living in a time where literally everything is being deconstructed
Yeah.
and completely shifting. So the things that we know and we hold on to might not even exist in the near future, with AI, etc. So there is so much happening. Be open, and the
Yeah.
best way to survive is to find connection amongst each other.
I love it. No, I couldn't think of any better way of ending this first episode, Shishani. I'm so excited to continue following your journey. Hopefully, seeing you soon again. But also, for people to come back to this podcast and explore what Voice of Solidarity can bring. Because if anything, this whole conversation has been about the permission, giving each other permission to explore, to be curious, but also to remember that there is a community out there that we need to invest in and nurture, especially when we realize that some parts of that community don't look like us, but they are part of our community. And I hope that we feel that connection with each other, even when we don't always agree. So thank you for being our first guest on Voice of Solidarity. Um,
It's
I
been a
hope that the
pleasure.
audience, thank you so much. I hope the audience will share this thread, will talk about it, and help us make sure that your story reaches all parts of our community and beyond. And to you, the audience, if you have a story you want to add to the tapestry, we want to hear it. If you have an image or a piece of art that inspires you, please do share with us. We want to see it, because the tapestry is never finished and neither is the work. So thank you very much. And until next time, keep weaving.